idea for the show.
I still don't know what the idea is.
It's about nothing.
Right.
Everybody's doing something. We'll do nothing.
They say, what's your show about? I say nothing.
There you go.
I think you may have something here.
Cross Coast Bias presents the League About Nothing podcast.
All right, everybody, welcome back. We have our Week 12 recap. Solid week in the NFL despite all these bye weeks. We got some good scores, but before we get to the scores, we actually had a pretty interesting week when it comes to the stuff we cover at the top of the show, the trades, the waivers, the injuries. We're going to jump right into it because we only had one trade this week, but it was a pretty good one. Al, how do you feel about this trade before we get to it?
Was it a pretty good one?
Al, it's a pretty interesting one. Has some far-reaching implications for the league. So I'd say good is, when I say good, I mean it's a good discussion. You know, we always try to moderate our calling people out for whether we think it was a good trade or not, or at least I do. I don't know about you. I try to moderate it because I've been on the wrong side of many, many trades, and I know trades that I thought looked awful that turned out really, really well for the opposite side.
Well, I just meant that it didn't involve my team.
Oh, well, so that's fair.
Any trade not involving my team is not a great trade.
I think this is our third week running where we have two or fewer trades. That's highly unusual for this league. I really think we've reached a saturation point of the remaining competing teams having not enough assets to actually motivate the remaining tanking teams to part with pieces.
Well, the problem is we still have all of the teams alive, pretty much, for the final playoff spot. So none of them really want to sell yet. You know, that we may change some minds after the results this week, but it's still a very tight race for that last playoff spot. None of those teams are excited to sell. And at the top, we got a lot of teams fighting for that second bye week spot behind Big. So it's kind of a strangulated market that we've seen for the last at least month or so. So actually this one, we had the rare competitor helping competitor.
Yeah, these are two teams. These are two teams that are both in the running for that second bye spot. And before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's tell it. It was a trade between Mel and Judd, where Mel acquired Kirk Cousins. In exchange, Judd got Mel's 2025 second round pick. So it's pretty straightforward. Quarterback for a second rounder. And it's unusual to see two teams that are this close in the standings and both clearly fully competitive making a deal at this late stage of the season.
Well, we've been talking the last few weeks about how Judd was suddenly flush with quarterback depth and, and talent after the injuries have basically promoted all of his backups that he had stashed into starters. And he also managed to snag Tommy DeVito off waivers while everyone else was sleeping. So he clearly felt that he had a surplus of quarterbacks and wanted to maybe recoup some of his draft pick that he's kind of moved for players throughout the season.
Yeah, a second round pick is obviously pretty valuable, but for a lot of people, that quarterback will be a little bit more important. Obviously, this was a matter of team need for Mel. He's been trying to acquire another quarterback, and like you said, Judd's spent a decent amount of capital moving forward or going forward. He's down a little bit of his 25 draft stock, so he wanted to replenish that a little bit. But
I know when I talked to him through the various trade channels in the last couple of weeks, he's been looking for a second round pick. So I know that was something that he was targeting.
Well, he managed to find it.
Yep, worked out well for Mel. He finally got the quarterback that he's been coveting for the last a month or so. After all that chasing of your Russell Wilson, he ends up trading for Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, I mean, and Kirk Cousins is fairly secure in his job right now. He's got the long-term deal. Obviously, he's got Penix on the bench behind him, which at some point they're going to want to make that switch, but he's playing pretty well right now. Cousins is, I mean, and he's been very productive from a fantasy perspective. So I don't see any likelihood that he loses his job right now.
Right. He's kept the Falcons mostly competitive. I mean, he's obviously getting up there in age, but we know quarterbacks can play a long time. So it's not as big of a concern at the quarterback position getting into your mid to late 30s. We do see a drop off at some point, but he's finally shaken off the early season struggles, probably due to coming off of an Achilles tear and being, in an advanced age for an NFL player. But he's certainly producing from a fantasy standpoint. And if he continues to produce and the Falcons continue to be competitive, we're not going to see Michael Penix anytime soon.
No. And of the two elderly quarterbacks coming off of the Achilles injury, his has gone significantly better than the Rodgers experience.
Yeah, shocking. That one of them has opted for a normal procedure and recovery, and the other one has opted for some kind of voodoo magic that apparently is not working.
I don't know what you're talking about. He almost came back last year. It was so close. He was this close.
The most recent stories coming out of New York now are that he's refusing to get any kind of scans or any kind of medical help at all from the team.
Oh my God.
For his various bumps and bruises.
Oh man. He says the word is he wants to play next year. I don't
think it's going to be for the Jets.
Well, we know it's not going to be for the Jets. I don't know if anyone is going to sign up at this point.
Right. It's one thing when your production outweighs your personality, but I'm not sure that's the case anymore.
No, the pendulum is swung far enough on this one that's not the case anymore.
Yeah, it would have to be a desperate team at this point to think that Rodgers is going to be your solution.
Yeah.
After a disastrous run in New York.
I was holding out hope that he could follow the full Brett Favre career arc and go to Minnesota for a year or two. But that doesn't seem likely because they'll have McCarthy coming off injury. But
you say that he's one setback away from potentially being an option there.
If
Darnold gets a lucrative contract from somebody else in the offseason.
Darnold will probably get a shot of some kind. I don't know if he'll get a starting job spot or like he's played well enough. Come in and compete or whatever it is. If I was that organization, I would try to keep Rodgers as far away as humanly possible from my developing young quarterback. No, I would not want that in the slightest.
You don't want him sitting in a dark room with Aaron Rodgers all offseason.
JJ McCarthy, Aaron Rodgers, and some ayahuasca. All right, let's move on.
What could go wrong?
That's we had the one trade. We had actually some decent waiver runs this week. There was a little bit more activity than normal, and some of those players were in fact relevant. And all of the bids were, I don't want to say all the bids were close, but there was some close bidding on a few of the guys.
This was the most bidding we had in a very long time.
Well, it was since that, who was it that inspired our lengthy chat discussion about waiver bidding and everything and how you
you're talking about Gravy.
Please stop. I'm so annoyed with myself that I know who you mean now.
It's on theme this week. It's Thanksgiving
that makes it
week.
So much worse.
It's Thanksgiving week. It's on theme. Come on.
Yeah. No, so that was I still don't know. Is it Calcaterra or Calcaterra?
Either one. As long as you call him Gravy, it doesn't matter.
I am never calling him Gravy. Anyway. So this week we had a similar high bid, $38 on Andy Dalton. And that was your bid of $38. The second highest bid on Dalton was Mel at 31. Then we had a bit of a drop off down to Big at 6. But you and Mel seem to be pretty lockstep on a lot of these free agent bids. And this one, there's a $7 gap there, but still you guys were in the same ballpark, which was significantly outside of everyone else's. So tell me about your Dalton bid.
Desperation. That's the best way that I can describe it. And I assume Mel was on a similar page because he then went and traded for Kirk Cousins.
This can describe so many things in your life. Desperation.
I definitely needed quarterback shots, anything. And I mean, Bryce Young, to his credit, has looked much better since the benching. I know it was a very low bar that for performance before the benching, but since the benching, he's at least looked replacement level versus
he's
clearly sub replacement level before.
I don't want to say he's turned his career around or anything, but he has certainly improved his standing.
Yeah, I no longer think that Andy Dalton is going to start any more games this year outside of an injury to Bryce Young at this point. I think they're going to have to leave Young out there and see if he can continue to develop, which is probably the best for the franchise.
Yeah, it's best for the franchise. And, maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. There's going to be changes there regardless, but you still you had to have seen some pretty good things to take him number one overall.
Right.
All right. So that was Andy Dalton. We had one other, this one was even closer contested. Amir Abdullah went for $14 to Judd. And we had some other really close bids on this one. Specifically, Flea was at 13, only $1 off. Big was at 9, Mel was at 8. You were at 6, which, as I just discovered a few minutes ago, means you bid $1 for every Christmas tree in your house.
Oh man, so many Christmas trees.
So this bidding on Amir Abdullah came because last week, basically every other running back on the team got hurt. It looked like he was going to start. He did end up starting. He did get a touchdown. So obviously he had a decent week fantasy wise. So Judd got his money's worth for the $14. But it's rare to see someone with this much activity all this close in terms of the bidding.
Yep. Everyone was paying for that spot start that they knew Abdullah was going to get this week. And it came through, cashed in, caught a little dump off touchdown early in the game. Didn't do much on the ground or outside of that touchdown, but paid off for this week considering the stuff that we normally see on waivers. It was well worth the fab, even if it's just a 1 week rental.
If we're really discussing it, it's way better than the stuff we normally see on waivers.
We really don't know what the long-term outlooks are for Madison or Zamir White until we get later in the week and see if they're practicing or not. So it may be more than a 1 week rental, but it's still only Amir Abdullah, which is why the bids were still a bit muted.
Yeah, we've seen the Abdullah show a few times. He's in his 30s. He's been around the league. He plays special teams. Everyone in this league has at some point or another rostered Abdullah somewhere, be it here or elsewhere. Every one of us has done it. Half of us have probably done it here.
Yeah. Well, they certainly didn't give any work to Dylan Lobb.
No, not yet. We're getting there.
We saw Sincere McCormick off the practice squad immediately into the number 2 role.
What a great name.
Far more explosive on the ground than Amir Abdullah did. So we may see more of him going forward if this tragic platoon continues.
Tragic platoon. Yeah. It sounds like the name of your backfield before you acquired Gibbs. All right. We had one other waiver claim worth mentioning. Chris Brooks went for $7 to Georgia Mike. It seems like he has taken over that number 2 role. So it could at some point down the line have some implications.
Snaps wise, he's definitely playing the most snaps behind Jacobs. I know Wilson handled more carries, but Brooks seems to be playing a decent amount of snaps on passing downs as well as some running downs. So if something were to happen to Jacobs, you'll probably see a platoon between the two. But if Brooks is getting all the passing work and they're splitting the rushing work, it would be the more valuable handcuff.
Yep. So that wraps up the waivers that were worth discussing. Let's move over. We've got, unfortunately, a good number of fantasy relevant injuries this week. So we're going to start as we normally do at the quarterback position. Gardner Minshew broke his collarbone. He's done for the year. He was replaced in the game by Desmond Ridder. So shout out to Big.
Here we go. This was the path to relevance that we were talking about.
Yeah. I mean,
injury or ineffectiveness.
Yeah, basically, he's their only healthy option at this point, isn't he? Is O'Connell still hurt?
They did open O'Connell's window to return from IR, and I believe he's supposed to practice this week. And I believe if he's healthy, he will start over Desmond Ritter because Desmond Ritter still looks like Desmond Ritter. Yeah, he was in there briefly, but he
Probably
looks.
doesn't know the system yet either.
I don't think that matters. I think
Oh, come
it's
on.
just Desmond Ritter. Unfortunately, he is what he is. Oh, highly inaccurate, prone to turnovers.
Yeah.
Not a
If you
great
can get those
combination.
turnovers under control, he'd be a good backup.
I think that's a big problem, though.
Yeah, no, it is. Well, I mean, we've seen guys get the turnovers under control before. We've seen it happen.
Sure, I guess he just needs another couple seasons worth of starts. Are there any teams available to that want to lose 10 plus games?
Let's stop
in the next
beating
2
around the
years?
bush. Where does he rank on a scale of Tommy DeVito to Drew Lock?
Oof. Okay, so he is better than Tommy DeVito and worse than Drew Lock.
Okay. Somewhere in the middle. Got it.
But I think everyone is better than Tommy DeVito, so it's not a it's a big
You're
win.
probably pretty close. I'm sure. Isn't Peterman still in the league?
At this point, I would rather start Nathan Peterman than Tommy DeVito.
So again, I think DeVito is perfectly fine as your number 3 quarterback. I think he's useless outside of that. Flinch had Minshew on his roster. Oh, he probably still does have Minshew. He didn't drop him, but that hurts his quarterback depth here. He did recently, obviously, acquire Bo Nix, so he's not completely screwed here. He's got Nix and he's got Lamar.
Yeah, Gardner wasn't exactly a lineup staple, but it hurts to lose that depth, any depth at quarterback, really.
Yeah, that's really the only other option he had because the rest of his is the Denver backups, both of them. All right, we're going to move on from the quarterbacks. That was the only quarterback injury of note, unless you count DeVito and Kyler getting the wind knocked out of them, small things like that. But anyway, couple of running back injuries. Montgomery hurt his shoulder. He left the game, did not return. This was in the third quarter. They were up multiple scores at the time. So it could have been just, hey, we don't really need to risk bringing him back in, or it could be that it's a bad injury. We really don't know yet.
Right. He came back to the sidelines with his helmet on, seemingly ready to go back in the game if they needed him, which they really didn't. And I know Campbell talked about injuries after the game, and really Khalif Raymond with the foot injury was the only one that he deemed as noteworthy.
Yeah, way to step on the wide receiver injury section.
were we going to go into detail about Khalif Raymond?
I had it written down, but I wasn't going to bring it up unless it seemed necessary. So I guess it's as good a time to do it now as any. Yeah.
There we go.
Khalif Raymond hurt, but not really fantasy relevant. Anyway, so that tough blow for Criddle, who is still fighting for that last playoff spot there, because Montgomery is one of his better options at the running back position.
He's got Saquon Barkley. That dude scores enough points for an entire running back roster.
I said one of, not his best. Yes, Saquon is a freak. We all have seen it. Yes, the time knife.
We'll get into that when we get to the matchup section.
Yeah. Another running back injury we have to touch on. J.K. Dobbins left the Monday night game with a knee injury. Didn't come back. We don't really have any updates on this one yet, but he's had some knee issues in the past, so definitely worth keeping an eye on.
Yeah, it didn't look bad.
No, it didn't.
But, I mean, the fact that he didn't come back to the game and didn't really look like he was ever close to coming back. And someone with his storied injury history makes you at least a little worried that we haven't heard any updates at all. It's been basically radio silence since the injury happened. So, yeah, right now we don't know anything, but it's definitely worrisome.
Yeah, and it was Edwards that filled in for him pretty much right away, but who knows what they do if he does miss an extended period. I don't think they give everything to Edwards. I think they'd probably use a committee approach.
Yeah, it's likely that Kamani Vidal will be back on the game day active roster and probably serve as the number 2 running back. The only reason he's not on right now is because that's Gus Edwards' role, and the third running back is Hassan Haskins, who plays special teams. And since Vidal doesn't play special teams, he's not active if he's not the number 2 back.
Other injuries at the running back position: Brian Robinson and Austin Eckler, both injured in the Washington Dallas game. Robinson hurt his ankle. Austin Eckler with a concussion.
Yeah, it was weird. Robinson got like twisted up early in the game.
Yeah.
Well, he ain't coming back. And then he immediately came back and took a carry for 7 yards and then didn't come back in the game again after
he
that.
Came back and then left again.
And then Eckler got crushed on a kick return.
Yeah. It was
ugly
after
hit.
the return on the onside kick as well. Like, so if
Yep.
Dallas had just taken the knee there and ended the game, that doesn't happen.
Yeah, it was an ugly looking injury. I would not expect him to play this week.
All right. So concussion for Eck, and also unfortunately a concussion for Romeo Dobbs. It's the same thing we say every week. It's a concussion. They're in the protocol. Hopefully they're okay. It hurts Flea's depth for the time being. She's been picking up injuries pretty rapidly in the last little bit, unfortunately. And this is just another one.
Yeah, her depth has been tested mightily this year. Just another log on the fire for her, unfortunately.
Other wide receiver injuries. Josh Downs hurt his shoulder, left the game, didn't return.
Oh, what an eventful game for Josh Downs. He was in the middle of a lot of stuff. He had at least 3 catches for 60 yards wiped out by penalties. Yeah. He got banged up late in the game. That was an interesting ride.
It seems like that's happened to a lot of plays in Indy this year. Not specifically with Downs. It's been, a bunch of guys. It's been Pierce. It's been Mitchell. It's been all sorts of guys. But I would like to know if they lead the league in yards called back because of penalties to their wide receivers.
They certainly had a lot this week. I saw at least 5 plays of 20-plus yards that got wiped out by penalty. So,
and part of it is because if you're letting a play develop that long, it's more likely that you're going to get a holding call. If you're going that deep that often, which they do throw deep quite a bit, you're more likely to have larger plays wiped out because that's what you're going for.
Well, I don't know if they go for it so much as Anthony Richardson cannot, for the life of him, complete a pass less than 40 yards down the field. So that's the offense.
When I say when they go for it, he definitely goes for it. No. Over to the tight end position. Scary one for Jatavian Sanders, who had a neck injury and went to the hospital.
Yeah, this one was really bad. He got flipped over and landed awkwardly on his neck. Did not look good.
Yeah. He was released from the hospital, so at least he's somewhat okay, but we don't have any updates on the severity, how long, what exactly it was he did. Hopefully he's okay and can, resume his season soon.
Yeah, because it's been a really promising rookie year since he's kind of taken over this role with all the other injuries to all the other tight ends. He's kind of been the one steady presence, probably playing a lot more than the Panthers expected him to play. But it's a promising year for the rookie tight end. We know how valuable tight ends are in this league, especially young ones that are also productive.
Yeah, so that's Sanders is on Ruggs' roster, so it's really probably not all that important for Rugg to get him back, in the interim or to replace that production. But, obviously you don't want to see a guy hurt regardless of whether you need him for the fantasy lineup this week or not.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be a long-term injury, which is good. Most of these injuries this week kind of look like 1 week injuries at most, besides obviously Minshew being out for the year with the broken collarbone, but was a bunch of injuries, but mostly short-term things, which is good for us.
Yeah. And I didn't mention Josh Downs is on JMC's roster, and JMC's still on the fringe of that playoff push. So, one more mark against him, unfortunately. Unless, like you said, Downs plays this week, which is possible. Although I think they've already said that that's unlikely for this coming week.
Yeah, they're calling him week to week, with this week being very unlikely, according to the last report I saw.
All right, so that wraps up the injury section. Before we get to the matchups, we have an in-depth discussion of John Mara's sleep habits.
Oh, that was a fun league chat discussion.
I didn't tell you that joke was coming right there. We were all having kind of the discussion about what he thinks about it, and then Vic comes in over the top, just like, I don't think he's actually losing sleep. Well, maybe not. I don't know.
This league tends to go down the rabbit hole a bit with discussions.
He's right. It was a weird discussion. He was not wrong. We were definitely phrasing it in an unusual manner.
Yeah, that's kind of what we do.
Yep, you're not wrong. Let's get to matchups. We had a pretty good week this week. A league median score of 185.49. Not the lowest we've had, not the highest we've had, but considering a bunch of teams on bye, it was pretty solid.
Yeah, there were a lot of teams on bye this week, so
Yeah.
there's not a lot of bench scoring this week.
No, there was a lot of teams that I don't think Mel had to make many rough. No, he doesn't make choices per se, but I don't think there was a lot of searching for the points. They were just the guys that had points,
Right.
and then a bunch of guys with zeros.
Yep.
All right, so our highest scoring team this week was Big. Big put up a
Shocking.
265.56. I actually want to point out our second highest scoring team was Mel. Mel put up a 218. That's a big gap right there.
Yeah.
Look at a 47-point gap between first and second highest scoring teams. I think those of you that are in the playoff hunt are in trouble.
Nobody wants to face Big's team.
All right, so let's get to that matchup. He played against JMC. JMC put up a 177.63. Solid week, not quite good enough to get over that median score. Big goes 2-0, improves to 22-2. JMC goes 0-2, drops to 9-15, and that's just about going to end his playoff hopes, which were slim at this point anyways.
Yeah. What I want to know is, how did Big manage to lose 2 games this year?
Listen, everyone has off weeks. You're allowed to make one mistake.
He put up 265 points on a week where like half the league was on bye.
Honestly, he was not missing that many people on bye. He was missing is Bengals, T. Higgins, Mike Gesicki, Aaron Rodgers, and James Cook.
Yeah,
But other than that,
he just
well, I guess we should mention Kenny Yeboah, who did have a touchdown to make his lineup last week. But really, so he was missing guys, but not
He's
a
just
huge
got-
portion of his lineup.
he's just got so many guys. Like this is this is the dream best ball lineup where you've got 30 guys that contribute every week. It's hard to ever have a down week because there's just so many options to make your lineup.
Yeah, fascinating to see. We've talked about how the strength of his team is the running back position. His wide receivers were what carried him this week. Sutton, Myers, Collins, Trey Tucker, Jerry Jeudy, and Tyler Boyd all making his lineup. Boyd in his super flex spot. Unusual to see that many wide receivers in Big's lineup.
Well, you say that, but he still got 50 points from his top 2 running backs, so it's not like they were a disappointment.
No, they were not.
When you score 265, there's not a lot of holes in the lineup generally.
And speaking of 50 points, Trey McBride had 38 from his tight end 1 spot, which
Nice
is
to have
a
McBride
really good
back.
score.
Well, he did set a Cardinals record with 12 receptions for a tight end.
So that's a lot. That'll get you a lot of those tight end premium points right there.
Yep.
But I gotta say, he actually didn't gain any ground at the tight end position really, because on the other side of things, Jonnu Smith put up a 33 and Shiga Conqueror put up almost 15 points,
Yeah, he actually got outscored at the tight end position on
which
the week,
is wild.
even with
a
38
point
points.
game.
That's what happens when you face Jonnu Smith. Dude, it's
Is it
just
usually what happens?
It has been in the last couple of months. He's been one of the best tight ends in our format for sure.
Yeah, it's been pretty good. For JMC's team, solid day from Will Levis, or do we think this is something that is going to continue?
I mean, it's been a trend since he's come back from being injured. we've seen basically nothing but solid games, not really showing up in the fantasy box score so much in our scoring because he still takes way too many sacks
Eight sacks on the day.
behind that
Eight
terrible
sacks and
offensive
threw a
line.
pick six.
Right. But he's mostly avoided the horrible head scratching, back breaking turnovers earlier in the year.
Well, he did have that pick six. Like,
Yeah, not as bad as what he was doing earlier in the year. He's
It's
still
true.
taking far too many sacks, but yeah,
this one was with the right hand at least.
he's flashed uh he's flashed the arm talent. We've seen some big time throws that only a handful of guys in the league can make. So it definitely a sign of progress, definitely moving in the right direction, and he's got a great rest of the season slate for fantasy matchups.
Other big scores on JMC's team, DJ Moore, 30-point day. It's been a while since we've seen DJ Moore do this.
Yeah, he did a little bit of everything. Threw a pass, had a 13-yard run, caught a 2-point conversion,
It's his highest score of the year. So
filled up the
nice,
box score.
Nice to see. All right, let's move on. Our next highest scoring team was Mel's team. Mel put up a 218.11. He beat Mr. Good News, who put up a 42.86. Mr. Good News setting some impressive low scores.
He got
Got
points
hit hard
from
by
the,
the buys this week, you know?
he got points from the quarterback position for the first time in a while.
Yeah, 0.56
Nick
from
Mullins threw a pass. Yeah, it's just kind of how the season's been going for Mr. Good News' squad.
It's by design. He's
Right.
he's got it under control.
He's
It
purposely
might
sold
not look
anyone
pretty
who
now.
scores points.
This is a trust the process situation. This is Philly is tanking.
Yep.
All right, but let's take a look at Mel's team because there was actually some points there.
Some points on this side.
Tony Pollard, Aaron Jones, and his running back spots combined for 43 points, 22, 21 points. Nice to see. We talked about the big tight end scores in the other matchup. This one, Noah Gray, 26 points, 2 touchdowns for the second week in a row.
Again.
And Zach Ertz with 21 points, 6 catches, and a touchdown.
Yeah, opposing teams just refusing to cover Noah Gray anywhere near the goal line.
I guess,
Have
who
you
would you
watched the
rather cover,
games?
Noah Gray or Travis Kelce? I mean, I would probably focus on Kelce.
Have you watched the games? Are we sure he's not like wearing camouflage out there or something?
I didn't see the entirety of the game. I did see his scoring plays. There was no camouflage involved that
Yeah.
I could see.
Just wanted to
And
make
it's
sure.
possible that it was really good camouflage and it fooled the cameras as well.
Interesting.
Possible. um, anyway, not a ton of other big flashy scores from Mel's team. Just a lot of mid-teens from guys like Noah Brown, Demario Douglas, Kareem Hunt, Rashad White. Just solid scores, but nothing fancy.
Yep. It was a good solid week. Ended up the second highest scoring. Not that he needed it this week, but
Yeah.
the points still help when you're jockeying for that second bye behind Big's team.
Absolutely. Oh, we should mention this 2-0 week brings Mel to 19-5, and this 0-2 week drops little Jerry Seinfeld to 0-24. And part of the reason Mel's team was, I think, so far off the pace of Big's team was that he was missing 2 of his 3 starting quarterbacks. So he didn't have, the ability to survive a fairly low scoring game from Geno Smith. Well, not that he didn't survive, because he got the 2-0 week, but without Josh Allen and Kirk Cousins, you're limited to just the one potential quarterback score.
Right. Yeah, it didn't really need it this week, but wasn't going to catch Big in points or record anyway. So at least
Probably
he
not.
was still able to distance himself from the other teams.
Yeah, that's true. It's a fair point. All right, let's move on. Our next highest scoring team was Criddle. Criddle put up a 212.09. He beat George Mike, who put up a 194.05. Now, this means that George Mike did finish over the median score, but unfortunately did not beat his opponent. He goes 1-1 on the week, moves to 12-12. Criddle gets the 2-0. He moves to 13-11. And obviously this was a fairly impactful matchup.
Yeah, this was the biggest matchup of the week by far. And unfortunately, only one of them had Saquon Barkley on their roster. Otherwise, it was a pretty tight matchup.
Yeah, Saquon pretty much was the difference. If you look directly at this, the final score was about 18 points apart, and Bucky Irving was Georgia Mike's running back one. He put up a 27. Saquon Barkley was Criddle's running back one. He put up a 48. So really,
if he just had like
that's a 21-point gap in a matchup that finished 18 points apart. Really, you're right. Saquon was the difference in this.
If he just had like a really good 30-point game, which is really good, then he would have lost. But he had 48 points, and so he won.
He's just having one hell of a year. We said it in the preseason as well. This was one of our.
I think I may have underestimated his 15 touchdowns.
Yeah, I remember saying, like, if I was playing redraft, which this is the first year I have not done redraft in a long time, I would have been all over Saquon. I would have spent up in the auction format. I would have drafted him after the McCaffrey injury. I would have drafted him one overall in pretty much any format, and that would have been completely justified. He is just crazy.
He's up to 12 touchdowns. So he's almost there.
It's just, I would really.
He is the number one scorer in fantasy this year.
Worth
every penny to the Eagles, and also Criddle trading for him in the offseason.
He already has a career high in rushing yards through 11 games. They've got another 7 games.
Right. He's very good.
If he keeps doing this, he's going to break every record he set, and some records that other people set. Anyway, this was a tight matchup. There were other good scores. Nick Chubb had 2 touchdowns, 20 points. George Kittle caught a touchdown, 26 points.
Yeah, the biggest implication here is now Criddle is sitting in the catbird seat for that number 6 spot in the playoff dance. He's got a 1-game lead. I know we have 2 weeks left to play with 2 potential wins every week, but the matchups say that he'll be favored the last week of the season playing Mr. Good News' team. So he should get a win there pretty easily.
Yeah,
and,
so lock 1 win up. Now he's just got 3 others to contend with. You say he's a game up. He's a game up on Georgia Mike, who's at 12-12, but there's another team at 13-11. That would be your team.
Right. So we haven't gotten to my matchup or the playoff odds. So
true, but I don't want to make it unclear. He's a game up on Georgia Mike, but Georgia Mike isn't the only other, possibility.
Right. Yeah. So that 1 win difference right now almost seems like a commanding lead based on how the matchups are going to play out the last 2 weeks. We'll see. There's still time. A lot of this is going to depend on if these teams can get over the median to the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's going to be the big,
because
the big differentiator right there.
Yeah, because the projected win-loss based on matchups are pretty much square right now.
Yeah, and there's also the points tiebreakers, which everything is still relatively close. Criddle got some ground this week, but it's not like 20 points you can't make that up.
Yep. So, there's these 3 teams are very much still alive for the last spot. We didn't see much separation this week.
No, for Georgia Mike, a little disappointing to not get the win. Nice to see your team go over the median at least. But what he's really got to feel good about is the fact that Caleb Williams had what I think is his best fantasy day of the year. He had 28 points.
Yeah, it seems like the firing of Shane Waldron has solved some problems for this offense. They've been far more productive. Unfortunately, they've lost back-to-back heartbreakers, so it hasn't really helped them as a team in the win-loss department, but it's definitely helping for fantasy.
Yeah, so he finished with 20. I lied. That was his second best fantasy score of the year. He had 31.89 against Jacksonville week 6 and was the QB1 there.
Everybody's QB1 against Jacksonville.
You're not wrong.
That's like playing Mr. Good News and having the highest point differential on the week.
I'm sure that happened when Big played him. for Georgia Mike, interesting to see Austin Hooper catch a touchdown. 4 catches, 4 targets, 59 yards, and a touchdown. We've seen some really weird tight end scores this year.
Yeah, he's needed some tight end scoring out of nowhere. He got it this week with Hooper and Kate Stover, who caught a rogue touchdown on the in the early part of that Houston, Tennessee game. They left him wide open on one of the first plays of the game.
Yeah. And that's not even to mention Jordan Akins in his super flex spot.
Yep. Yeah, he's needed the tight end production. But Austin Hooper has been one of the more consistent pieces of the Patriots passing offense the last few weeks. He's been getting pretty consistent looks. They haven't really figured out their wide receiver rotation yet, but they've been using a lot of dual tight ends, so it's definitely helping Hooper.
Hopefully that trend continues for Georgia Mike, because like you said, he could use the help. All right, let's move on to our next highest scoring team, which you said we didn't get to yours yet. Here we are. It was your team. You put up a 188.86. You beat my team. I put up a 140.28. No, there you go. You took the season series. Maybe we'll be more competitive next year.
Yeah, well, you're now 2-22, so
yep.
I think most teams have taken the season series from you. Not a giant accomplishment this year when you're not really trying to win.
I don't know what you're talking about. I've been all in this season. That's why I traded all my picks away. You had a good week from Tua. Tua, welcome back. 31.48 points. Kind of wasted on me, but still nice to see. Jahmyr Gibbs, 27 points. Jalen Waddle, out of nowhere, 33 points. It's been a long time since we've seen that.
Welcome back. The problem was the last few years it's been a very narrow target tree. It's been pretty much Hill and Waddle. And this year they've added Achane and Jonnu Smith to the mix, and it's really pushed Waddle down the pecking order most weeks. So it was nice to finally see him get some targets and be productive, even though the 3 of the 4 touchdowns still went to Jonnu and Achane.
We know he's perfectly capable. It's just a matter of, what the team actually does. There's no doubt that Waddle is a talented and capable player, though. It's just strange to see his usage fluctuate so wildly. Yeah,
since Tua's come back from the brain injury, they've really made it a point to get the ball out as quickly as possible. So you're seeing a lot of quick dump offs to guys like Jonnu and Achane who can make stuff happen with the ball after the catch. And you're seeing a lot less deep shots to Tyreek and Jalen Waddle. So we'll see if they start to incorporate that more into the offense in the back half of the season here. But so far it's been a heavy emphasis on the quick hitting, quick passing offense I'm assuming to keep Tua alive.
Well, I mean, that's also what Tua has done best since he's been in the league. He's always had one of the fastest timed throws, even when they were targeting further downfield than you would expect it that fast.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, so let's get to the really important part of this matchup, which is the fact that 3 of our 4 running backs scored 2 points or less.
We need running backs.
Well, at least you had Gibbs in there.
Right.
For your team, TJ Hawkinson, 25.6 points. That was your big in-season acquisition. Nice to see him being productive pretty much right away back from his injury.
Well, what happened was Josh Oliver missed the game with injury, so instead of platooning with Hawkinson for half the snaps, they actually let Hawkinson play the vast majority, and sure enough, when he was out there more, he caught more passes.
Before we move on, I just want to take your temperature for the millionth time on Richardson. 11 completions on 28 attempts, 172 yards. Not great.
So the box score looks a lot worse than the actual game. If you watch the game,
here's my problem with this, though. We've said that a dozen times this year. At some point,
it's true, though.
It is what it is. Yeah, but if they keep dropping these deep passes and things keep getting called back on penalties and stuff, well, maybe that's just the nature of this type of offense.
He's horribly inaccurate. We know that. So that's going to lead to more drops when the ball is not placed direct, in an easily catchable position. But there was so many big plays that were wiped out by penalties in this game. Josh Downs had at least 3 catches for 60 yards wiped out on stupid penalties, like illegal man downfield, offensive pass interference, uh, stuff that didn't even affect the play for the most part. It wasn't great. This box score could have looked a lot better, and the team was rolling in the first half, but yeah, things fell apart in the second half, and Detroit just kind of stepped on their throat a little bit, which they've been doing to pretty much every team this year. So not that shocking.
I don't think there was a lot of hope against Detroit for a win, but you still want to see, I don't know, better than 11 for 28.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Not great.
I will say though, this is like the fourth or fifth time that we've actually heard, oh well, it was a lot better except for a bunch of stuff got called back. Half the time those things are getting called back, they're getting called back for like holding on the offensive line. Maybe that wasn't the case this week. I can't lie. I have not seen a single minute of this game other than like the 10-second that they showed at like halftime of some other game. But I'm going to get to it. But with Richardson, it's too much of a trend where, they keep having plays called back. Well, if you're holding on to the ball that long and forcing your offensive line to hold, it's kind of on you sometimes.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that he holds the ball too long to create penalties, but it's not been a great season. We were kind of hoping for more progression than we've seen for sure this year.
All right, let's move on. Our next highest scoring team was Flea's team. Flea put up a 185.77, clearing that median by a healthy 0.28. And she beat Judd's team. Judd put up a 171.45. So Judd finished under the median.
Yeah, this was a needed 2-0 week for Flea after taking an 0-2 last week and kind of falling back from the rest of the pack.
Yeah.
She's right back in the mix now with a 2-0 week versus one of her main competitors in Judd.
This week with the two teams going 2-0 and 0-2 puts both of them at a record of 17-17 now.
Yep.
So on Flea's team, no really gigantic scores. Her leading scorer was David Moore, put up a 24. I think that's the first time that has ever been said about about David Moore putting up 24 or being someone's leading scorer.
These were two teams that were decimated by weeks and injuries.
Lots of buys.
Look at up and down these lineups, such luminaries as Cooper Rush and Amir Abdullah and Justice Hill, David Moore, Calvin Austin, like Brock Wright. These are starters on two teams that are fighting for a bye, that are locked in playoff teams.
These are two legit playoff teams. Yep.
And these do not look like playoff lineups.
Yeah, the only redeeming factor for either one of these teams, the leading scorer on Judd's team was Keenan Allen, 26 points. The only redeeming factor was that both of these teams got pretty good quarterback scores, even though, one of them was Cooper Rush. So 18.48 from Cooper Rush and 15.97 from Jordan Love for Judd. And on Flea's side of things, Darnold with a 21.85 and Stafford with a 19.97. So, I mean, other than that, pretty much every position was at least a little disappointing for these teams.
It's just a testament to how deep these teams are, and this is the kind of rosters you need if you want to be a playoff team. You have to be able to get by weeks where you don't have all of your stars playing.
It's fair. It's a good point.
Yeah,
I want to know how you feel about Travis Kelce and Mark Andrews combining for 37 points in this matchup.
Yeah, they're good. That's why they paid the first round picks to get them.
Just, they could have been on your team still.
I didn't need him.
To beat me, no, you did not. All right, let's move on. We got one more matchup here to cover. Flinch put up a 185.20. He finished 0.29 under the median score, so just missed it. He's the seventh highest scoring team, first 1-1 manager there. He beat Benign Rugg, who put up a 153.57. Flinch's story, same as it has been pretty much all year. Lamar Jackson's good. Derrick Henry's good. Terry McLaurin, 24 points. Bo Nix continues his just reign of terror and decimates everyone in the league. 20.92. He's legitimately alive for the Offensive Rookie of the Year award right now.
Yeah, as he should be. And he's currently, what, QB7 on the season?
He's high up there. I'm not sure exactly. Take a look. Yeah, QB7.
CJ Stroud only wished he could be this good last year, and he shot up to be Dynasty 101 in the offseason. So we'll see what happens with Bo Nix.
Yeah, that trade looking better by the week for Flinch. Oh, and that means it's looking worse for me by the week. All right, on the other side of things, Jaden Daniels, 31 points. Ruggs got to be happy with that pick, even if he's only got that slight edge on Nix for that Offensive Rookie of the Year award. Jordan Addison, 35 points on the day. We didn't really touch on this in our matchup, but Justin Jefferson with a disappearing act and Jordan Addison just saying, I'll take all those targets and points.
Yeah, Chicago did everything they could to take Jefferson away, and Darnold just said, okay, fine, I'll throw to Addison and Hawkinson. This is what happens when the offense has multiple weapons. You can still move the ball without your best player. Good for real life, not great for fantasy. For me, at least.
Not great. So for Flinch, Cole Kmet, almost 20 points on the day, and Luke Schoonmaker, almost or 17.25 on the day. On the other side of things, Hunter Henry, 13. Jatavian Sanders, 11 points. Theo Johnson, 10 points. Nice to see a bunch of tight ends get in the roster with good scores.
Yeah, this is what he's looking for from these young guys. I mean, not Hunter Henry, but the two young tight ends that he's got. Yeah, this is the hardest position to fill, and he took some late round shots on these guys, and they've really outperformed their draft position.
Yeah, Bryce Young, 15.77, looked better than he's looked in a while.
Yeah, he kind of falls under the same category as Will Levis. Sat out for a couple of weeks and came back and looks leagues better than he did early in the season.
Yeah.
So, I'm not sure what happened, but some kind of switch must have flipped because he's playing with far more confidence and decisiveness than he was early in the year.
And if he manages to continue to develop and actually can, hold that job going forward and turn into a competent and fully useful player, Ruggs in good shape. He's got Drake May, who's looked good as a rookie, Daniels, who's looked phenomenal as a rookie, and then all of a sudden he's got three young quarterbacks to anchor his team.
Yeah, we were talking about Bo Nix being quarterback 7 on the year. Jaden Daniels is quarterback 4 on the season.
Yeah.
Pretty good year for rookie quarterbacks.
Couldn't ask for more than that. Although I think his first half of the year has been a bit better than his second half. This last game, notwithstanding for fantasy purposes. They've hit a little bit of a slump where they've lost 3 games in a row. So
yeah, and he had battled that rib injury, kind of limited a lot of his explosiveness, and they kind of feed off of his explosive plays both in the passing and the running game.
He looks like he's in some pain out there at times. All right, that wraps up the matchups. So let's go take a quick look at our Dynasty Daddy Fantasy Football Playoff Calculator playoff predictor odds. All right, really, we only have one spot to look at. We've got the top 5 teams locked in at 99%. Those teams are Big's team, Mel's team, Judd's team, Flinch's team, and Flea's team. The 6th and final playoff spot still up for grabs between Criddle, Al, and Georgia Mike. Currently, the percentage chance to make the playoffs stand at Criddle 65%, Al 25%, and Georgia Mike 10%.
We can finally retire JMC's playoff hopes. He's been sticking around for a lot longer than we thought, and a lot longer than Dynasty Daddy's playoff predictor odds gave him credit for. But I think at this point,
he's been mathematically eliminated if we count the one Criddle win against Georgia Mike as a given, or not, excuse me, against Mr. Good News as a given.
Yep.
65% for Criddle, 25% for you, despite the fact that your teams have the same record. I'd imagine that this has something to do with your upcoming matchups.
We both have tougher matchups this week. And then we both have easier matchups to last week. And he's got a little bit of a point lead, so I'm assuming that's the difference. I don't know if it's a 40% difference, although his matchup week 14 is a lot easier than mine because he plays Mr. Good News and no one's even in the same stratosphere as Mr. Good News for giving opponents wins. So he's a little bit more locked in than I am. I think we're going to have a bunch of teams sitting with probably 13 wins again next week.
All right, so that wraps up our playoff predictor odds. Let's move on. We've got a discussion now on the difference between social capital, SocCap, and SoCap. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. No, that's the wrong page.
That's for a different podcast.
Yeah. Although, honestly, in writing that out and saying it, I realized that SocCap is basically the worst one to say. Social capital is better, and SoCap is better to say, in my opinion. For typing it out, hyperbole, like I don't really care about this. Like, just throwing that out there. I don't actually have a strong opinion on this, but
I do, and it's definitely SocCap.
SocCap is basically the worst one to say, though. I would rather say social capital and say the whole thing out.
I think it's the best one to say.
No. See, I lied. We did have a discussion about this. Let's move on. What we're actually going to have a quick chat about is quarterback scoring, and not just quarterback scoring, but negative quarterback scoring as well. Do you want to give a little bit of background here, or do you just want to go into it?
Well, this came up because we have some members of this league that are in a kind of extreme version of negative scoring for quarterbacks. We have a bit of it in this league. Mel likes to incorporate sacks as a stat against the quarterback, and so we have negative points there. But there are some extreme scoring out there that probably inspired by stuff that Scotty Fish has done before in some of the Fish Bowls, where you have negative points for everything you do. Incomplete passes, negative points, things like that, where it can really start to hurt you if you are starting a guy like Anthony Richardson.
The league that basically inspired this was an interception was -3 points, and a pass attempt gave 0.05 points. So for every 20 passes that you attempt, you gain a point. But for every incomplete pass, you lose a full point. Which that's a lot of lost points for an incomplete pass.
It can be a painful scoring setting.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to say that I am against any negative scoring in any capacity in any league,
even for any interceptions.
Period. Right. I don't think that you should have negative points for anything. For interceptions, fumbles, sacks, nothing. Not just exclusive to quarterbacks. I'm talking any and all positions. There should not be negative scoring in fantasy. Get that out of here. What are we doing? The point of this is to have fun, and points are fun. Who wants negative points? I don't understand that. That will never make sense to me.
You're telling me that it's not satisfying to see a player on opposing team, like in a close matchup, have somebody lose a couple points at the end. Like, the quarterback who you're facing has an okay game, and Monday Night Football, that quarterback that you're facing gets just enough points to get past you, and then they get one more chance and he throws an interception and it knocks it back down, and then you win despite the fact that you were just losing. You don't want that anymore? You want that gone?
The Germans have a word for that. Do you know what that word is?
Germans have a word for everything.
Do you know what that word is?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure which word you mean. Like the delighting in the misery of others, like Schadenfreude, like
exactly. Yes,
I'm sure I mispronounced that.
That is the one.
I do pronounce that properly. Yeah, no, the Germans have a word for everything. It's a great language. Shout out to anyone who here who speaks German, which is probably none of us.
All of our listeners from Germany.
Yeah, we're big in Germany. Yep.
Guten Tag.
So I understand where you're coming from. I disagree. I
Well, you're
think that
wrong.
yeah, that's fine. I think -1 per incompletion is taking it to an extreme and unnecessary. And at that point, you've gotten to a stage where it's fairly detrimental to enjoying the product and all that. But I do believe that there should be some negatives associated with plays that are turnovers. And
But it's
if
so
you're
hard
adding,
to legislate that. I mean,
sure, it's
if
not
a guy
necessarily always the quarterback's fault when there's an interception. You've seen guys get hit in the hands and it tips to another guy. Yeah, it sucks when your quarterback loses a point for that. But I'm of the opinion that still there should be some negatives. I'm not saying each interception should be -3. That's too much for me. I want to lose a point or two.
that's a bit extreme. Yeah, I don't. So I understand the reasoning behind stuff like this, right? You're trying to model the fantasy scoring to more properly reflect the impact that the players are having in a game, right? But that's such a fine line to walk because I mean, how far are you going to tie fantasy scoring to EPA now? Is that what we're going to do? And maybe you shouldn't get as many points for yardage and touchdowns that happen when you're in the fourth quarter down by 5 touchdowns. Those fantasy points shouldn't count as much as when a game is actually in doubt.
Oh, that's boring. Then we don't have any innovation. Then it's all the same. If every league,
We can have innovation in scoring more points. That's what I want to see.
well,
Give me
there
points
is.
for long touchdowns or give me points for first downs.
There's
I
plenty
enjoy
of that though. But if you don't try out new things and experiment with scoring settings and try and switch things up, we're never going to find the next fun setting. Like tight end premium had to come from somewhere. PPR was not an original setting in fantasy football. You got to try these things out to see if they work.
Right. And the ones that lead to more points are good. The ones that are negative points are bad. That's what I'm saying.
Our old redraft league, we did. I don't want to say a version of this because it wasn't a version of this, but we used to have half a point per completion. Way back in the day, we had a full point per completion, which by the way was ridiculous.
Quarterback scoring 80 points a week. That was fun.
Do you remember when I went to the championship with Sean Hill as my quarterback?
Yeah, because he was throwing 45 passes a game.
I think where this particular scoring setting that we talked about before went wrong was the discrepancy between the reward for a pass attempt or completion and the negative associated with an incompletion. If this
Right, 'cause
was
sometimes in real life, incomplete passes are good. Sometimes you throw the ball away to avoid a sack, or
That's
the
fair point.
coverage is tight and you're not going to want to force it in there. You just
Yeah.
throw it away. That's a smart play, and now you're being penalized in a fake game for a smart play that's happening.
Yeah, that's fair. I think we're both in agreement that extreme negative points such as these, I don't want to say don't really have a place because I'm sure there is a place for them. But it's something that I don't think is necessary or advantageous to basically any league.
Well, again, going back, I don't know what the creator of leagues like this is thinking. I know I'm familiar with the Scott Fishbowl thinking that they're trying to more mirror things that are impactful on the actual NFL field as opposed to just in our fantasy realm.
I believe based on what I've seen is that the idea was to make it so that you essentially can reflect when a quarterback does in fact have a crappy game in real life in fantasy. Because like you said, a lot of those garbage time stuff, that doesn't really help you. And if you're down 4 scores in garbage time and rack up 17 fantasy points, but the fact that you were, maybe -8 fantasy points going into that is a more accurate representation of a bad game from a quarterback perspective.
Yeah, I think it's just too tough to separate the individual impact into a fantasy score. It's a difficult thing to kind of balance out. And if there isn't a good way to really do it, then in my mind, I'd rather just not do it at all.
Well, one thing that I will say in favor of this type of idea is I think that a lot of people have discussed how rushing quarterbacks have an outsized impact on fantasy matchups. And I think that scoring like this generally would lean towards the non rushing quarterbacks in a lot of cases. Maybe not all cases, because a lot of the time those rushing quarterbacks are going to throw fewer times. So they're going to have less incompletions. But I think that,
Right.
you know,
I don't see how that would
well,
benefit pocket passers when they're having, if you're a
I,
running
I want to
quarterback, you're going to have
I
less
want to phrase
volume
this
and so
properly.
less incompletions, right?
A lot of the pocket passers are able to survive in the league because they have a better completion percentage than guys who have the ability to run.
Right. But if you're not getting points for completions, but you're getting negative points for incompletions, then it's not really balanced out properly, right?
I wonder if there's a way to work this and balance it so that it lessens the impact of the rushing quarterbacks in comparison to, more traditional quarterbacks, which I don't know if it's a thing worth doing or that should be done,
Well,
but
we certainly tried with our point and then half point per completion to try
yeah,
to pump up the passing quarterbacks into a more level playing field, but all we did was inflate quarterback scoring to a ridiculous amount. Then we
there were
left all the
50
other
point,
positions
there
in
were
the
50-point
dust.
days on a regular basis.
Right.
So
So it's not we've tried for 20 plus years to figure it out, and it was not great.
yeah. I also don't know where I come down on the rushing quarterback stats should be different than running back rushing stats, because the quarterback gets the ball every play. They're going to have an or outsized number of attempts to run the ball, even if they don't take all those attempts.
It's the most important position in the sport, arguably in any sport. It's the most impactful on a down by down basis. So they should be the focal point of the scoring system because generally they're having the biggest impact on an individual game, whether a team wins or loses.
Well, that's an argument right there in favor of the negative scoring points. They have an outsized impact on it, and that means that they have to have a good game for them to have that positive impact.
I'm not sure that's true.
I, I think it is. I think I just explained it very concisely. In fact, if
I
they
do not
have a
agree.
bad game, they're still the most important point, but most important part. But you're going to have, a worse time of it because your quarterback didn't perform as well. Garbage time is a real thing.
Yeah, but the negative points don't do anything for garbage time production. Unless you're
No,
tying
but
unless
if you're
tying to
in garbage
EPA,
time, it's
hard to
probably
say
because
that.
your production earlier was bad, so you'll have the negative points from that section to overcome before you get to the positive from the garbage time. I don't know how I've been put into the position of arguing for negative 1 point per completion, which I, again, am not in favor of.
You made this deal with the devil.
Anyway, I don't know how I would approach a league like this. I would probably heavily invest in rushing quarterbacks, even more so than in other leagues.
Yeah, if you're getting penalized for volume, then you don't want guys who have heavy passing volume. If a guy's throwing 700 times a year, you're gonna naturally have more incompletions and interceptions and more negative plays just by sheer volume, even if you are a better quarterback and you have a high completion percentage. So yeah, it's a tough thing to navigate, and I mean, it definitely. I appreciate the different wrinkles and things that are outside the standard scoring box. I'm a big proponent of reviewing your league settings. They can have an outlandish impact on player values that people don't often appreciate, and this is definitely a scoring setting that would skew away from traditional values that you would see. You can't go to the magazine store and print out a draft sheet
No.
and take that in with these kind of settings.
It's not going to help you.
So for that, I appreciate it.
Yeah. Again, I like innovation. I like to see new things, and this is certainly something new.
But I would
don't
not want to
know.
be in that league.
I don't know how successful it is. I don't know if I would enjoy it, but it's something that I can appreciate from just an interesting perspective.
Yeah. If I'm starting a league from scratch, I'm not putting negative scoring in there. But I understand it's something that's a remnant that's been around for the beginning of fantasy time. This has always existed. So it's just one of those things.
Well, I think that's our thoughts on the situation for now.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll have
We're not going to resolve this tonight. Let's
maybe
see what
we'll have
everybody
some
else
follow
thinks.
up at some point soon on negative quarterback scoring. But that'll do it for today.
Yeah, let us know what you guys think in the league chat.
All right, we're gonna get out of here. We will see everybody next week. But until then,
See you in the league chat.